the Q&A portion of today's talk. If you did not receive a piece of paper when you came in, please raise your hand and one of our volunteers will come by and give you a piece of paper. Please refrain from asking questions directly to the speaker. The volunteers will take your questions, pass them up to me, and I will direct them to today's speaker. So first off, let's find out a little bit more about our speaker. So where are you from originally?
I'm from the United States of America, from a county called Saratoga in New York.
And how long have you been in Korea, and what brought you here?
I would like to say when Koreans ask me, 한국에 어떻게 왔었냐고? Whenever they say that, I say like, 비행기로. So how did I come to Korea? I came by plane. What brought me here? Yes, plane. But it was a job prospect in 2008, December of 2008. I was approaching graduation, and I did not know what to do, but I knew that I wanted to travel. I was a bit sick of school after 4 years. I needed to change, and a friend had suggested teaching English in East Asia. I was more into it, and I went with Korea. It seemed to have a nice package. In Wando, an island. Oh, seeing an island, beach, swimming. I don't know. It's more of a fishing town, but I love it just the same.
And so you mentioned you were finishing school. What is your educational background? What did you do at university?
In the University of Rochester, a private university in upstate New York, I had studied history with a focus in East Asia. And now I'm studying at Chiarella. I take some classes also, summer classes at SUNY universities in New York.
So you're a full-time graduate student now?
Yes.
Okay. And you're studying political science?
That's right.
Okay. So let's move on to your topic today. You talked a little bit about the skewed coverage that exists in some of the Western mainstream media, particularly in news sources such as the BBC, which have a more progressive reputation. In your opinion, what is the reason for this skewed coverage? Who is pulling the strings and why?
I don't want to speculate on specific individuals pulling the strings. I am not a detective, but if I were a detective, I would say these are my leads. I would say that our leads are within the British government. The British government, of course, controls BBC, and even though BBC does have a lot of journalistic freedom, they are still funded by the British government, and the British government does have interests in seeing Ukraine join the West. The Conservative, and Labour too, but especially the Conservative Party, now in power, they've talked a lot quite recently. There's been a few sessions they've had this past 2 weeks about the need to deter Russia and to be prepared for war with Russia. And it's just like, whoa, hello, like Britain, it's not your country, it's Ukraine. Even if there was a war between Ukraine and Russia, like Ukraine's not NATO. That's why it's so important to get Ukraine in NATO right away, because if Ukraine is in NATO, when Russia invades, they have every right to attack. But even if not, they'll still go in anyway, like in Bosnia, I'm sure.
Going back to Russia briefly, you mentioned that Russia is no longer communist. However, do you think that there are ambitions within Russia to reclaim former USSR territory, or at least reestablish their sphere of influence? Do you see expansionist tendencies from Russia currently?
That specifically, I'm not fully versed on as much. I haven't studied Russia that much since the collapse of the USSR. I don't want to take the stance of just saying like, oh, it's by the fall of Russia or like Ukraine. I'm just trying to present that there's all angles. Russia isn't always having anyone's best interest at heart. I mean, I said their ethnic policies are really bad. I do see them having kind of a sphere of influence. I can see them more not trying to conquer places that have a sphere of influence, but that's to be expected. It's good for everyone all around. I mean, if you're a tiny country like Lithuania, it makes more sense to be to have economic and cultural ties with Russia right next door than to have cultural ties with the USA. I'm advocating, even in Korea's case, I think that it's okay to be in the Chinese cultural influence because, like, I don't think that your neighbor, like Russia and Lithuania, I don't think Russia wants to have a war. I don't think Russia wants to lose resources. I think it was not bad to be part of this sphere of influence. As far as expansion goes, they haven't. I didn't see them expand against anybody's will. They South Ossetia, which was part of Georgia, which broke out from the USSR broke. They had a bunch of pro-Russian separatists there, and the Russians did move in and did help that region become independent, but they were not next. There have been a couple of areas that have broken off in countries, and Russia may have sent troops in to help, but the only one that has been actually annexed was Crimea. That's the only land that has been formally annexed, and they did overwhelmingly vote for that, so I won't fault them too much for annexing Crimea.
Okay, you were comparing communism and fascism, and one of the parallels you drew between the two is they both have a tendency towards totalitarianism.
Oh no, I was saying that I'm very much against that. That totalitarianism is just a buzzword that's used by people to blur the two, and they should not be blurred.
Okay, one of the audience members points out that some of your points about fascism can also apply to social democracy as well, especially with the focus on idealism instead of materialism. Can you expand on that idea? It's an ambiguity caused by the English language. When Marxists especially talk about idealism and materialism, they mean different things from what a lot of people do. When they say idealism, they don't mean like the ideal, an ideal you want to strive for. Every socialist country that's existed has had the socialist ideal, the ideal worker. They want that ideal. And when people talk about materialism, people mean, oh, you buy too many shoes or belts or purses. But when Marxists talk about idealism and materialism, they mean idealism as in society is, the motive drove of society is culture and ideas, whereas materialism says the motive drove of society is people getting up, going to work, people complaining about not being paid enough, people uprising in the extreme, but in the non-extreme, joining labor unions. If you go back to ancient China, you know, what made the Han Dynasty appear was not somebody had a different idea of ruling. It wasn't that Confucianism was better than the Qing Dynasty's anti-Confucianism. That's not what created the Han Dynasty. It wasn't that Confucianism as an idea won out over non-Confucianism. It went from the Qing Dynasty to the Han Dynasty because it was a peasant rebellion led by the founder of the Han Dynasty. He led a peasant rebellion and he founded a dynasty. So that fits in very well with materialism, and it's an approach to studying history. It does not mean that when I'm anti-idealist, it doesn't mean I'm against romantic ideals. It means that I think that historically, when I study history, that materialism is the driving force, not idealism. But there is lots of silly idealism. Eastern Europe had plenty that they thought people would just go up to work, and they had problems and incentives in Eastern Europe. They had quotas, and if you met the quota or went above the quota, then they move your work quota up. So in Eastern Europe, a lot of times, if you work lazy, it's better because then they expect less. If you work hard, then they want you to work hard all the time. So yeah, there were problems, and they did rely too much on the idea that everybody would jump into socialism. So on that, that I will admit there's problems there. But I think it's different from the fascists saying that the culture, like the German culture, it will reign supreme. The German culture is fighting against Jewism, like Jewish Bolshevikism. I think that's just hogwash, that the Germans are under attack by ideology. Okay, shifting our focus to, you mentioned the militarization of the Maidan protests. In a lot of the Western mainstream news media, that was portrayed as being in response to allegations of uses of force against protesters. When you have these competing claims, how do you personally, and what do you recommend for the audience, how can you sift through competing claims such as that and try to find the real truth to the situation?
I would say just trying to sift through the claims is good. If you're doing that, you're doing better than most. As far as As far as the snipers go, I don't know, I can't say how much Yanukovych, the president's forces, were involved, or what percentage was the protesters. I won't mention that. I do know that both sides have used weapons, and you can very clearly see videos and photos of that. That's not in dispute. It's always good to check your sources, check who's funding your sources. Especially when you study like Stalin, a lot of stuff you trace back to Richard Pike's Robert Conquest or William Randolph Hearst. William Randolph Hearst went for the Nazis, so you should doubt anything he says that's, you should doubt a lot of stuff that's right at the time, for example. As far as new stuff goes, there's no way to tell right off the bat. Just look for photos, look for videos as much as you can, and also be aware that people who speak English, the same way in Panama as in Ukraine, people who speak English are probably going to be pro-West. When America went to Panama and to get rid of Noriega, a lot of the news coverage was very, very pro-Noriega. And the people they interviewed, the people who were interviewed were very Noriega, and everybody they interviewed was pro-Noriega. But they were also fairly well-to-do, educated English people. So look at the background of people being interviewed. Try to find stuff where you hear people speaking in their native language. That can be a good sign. And I guess just do your best and then wait till all the dust is settled to firmly say who did what. Don't jump to conclusions and don't advocate military action. That should be a last resort. It should not be preemptive, and it should be that last resort.
Okay, we're running out of time. We're going to try to squeeze in a few more questions. So let's do this rapid fire. So you mentioned that the Tea Party in America, their ideals seem to be in some ways a thin veil for fascism. What do you think the chances are that true democracy can win out over fascism in the USA?
A really good book I recommend. We talk about much better. The person who talks about much better than me is Michael Parenti. He's got a book called Democracy with a Few. If you want to get in contact with me, I can lend you the book. He has a very good book about that and voting systems. It takes a long to explain that one, but it's a very good book. I recommend it.
Okay, and shifting slightly, but in a similar vein, the current situation of ISIS in the Middle East, with the U.S. seems to be preparing a coalition for intervention there. Do you think this situation or other situations, when is military intervention acceptable in your opinion?
I don't want to say any rules about military intervention being acceptable here or there. With regards to ISIS, as bad as they are, I think that America intervening will only make it worse. There could be an ideal. There could be some military who could go in there with minimal casualties and make everything better and democratic, and that would be nice. But no such army exists. America is not going to make things better. They're not going to try to make things better. They're going to make things more profitable for them, to their interest. And I don't see it getting better. Because you can look at Afghanistan. What happened after 2001? We got rid of the Taliban, yay, but Islamic fundamentalism is still a problem in Afghanistan, and now that opium and child rape is a big thing now. Bakhbazi, dancing boys of Afghanistan, it's easily verifiable. Opium, off the charts production, it's worse. Anytime the U.S. intervenes, it gets worse, is my thing. I'll take ISIS over the American intervention, which will only make things worse, I think.
Okay, we're about to have our last question for today. Your topic was very interesting and generated a lot of discussion. If we didn't have time to have your question answered today, please feel free to address the speaker directly after the talk. So today's last question, there was just a ceasefire signed yesterday between the Ukraine and the separatist forces in eastern Ukraine. How do you think the situation can be improved? Do you think, and how can it be resolved successfully and satisfactorily for all sides?
I think it would help to have a mediator, a third party, but that third party cannot be the U.S. or the Western powers, because even though they're not directly involved, they are not neutral. They have very clearly declared their support for one side or the other. I don't know if there is a third party who can mediate right now. I don't know who would be good, but I think Ukraine and Russia, without outside influence, should sit down and talk. I think the people of Crimea and the Donetsk should also be involved. I think it's got to be those: Ukraine, Russia, Crimea, and Donetsk. I think four-way negotiations And concessions. I think everybody in all sides makes certain concessions. I think every side has something to give, and they should, for the sake of peace.
Okay, let's give him a round of applause for welcoming our